Welcome to the Arcaro Insights podcast, where we help B2B executives deliver better results with the latest ideas in change and innovation for your organization. The episodes feature fascinating discussions with interesting people who have a great story to tell, as well as our original content communicated with AI voices. If you can, please read the show notes to get the most from each episode. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome back to the Arcaro Insights podcast. It's great to have you again. Thank you for joining us. So our mission is to help business leaders and executives navigate the journey to a more adaptive world in the face of complexity. And let's face it, whilst we're all looking at a world where we see it to be VUCA, uncertain, businesses really struggle to understand what tools and techniques to be applied. And so they end up doing what they used to do beforehand, which may not be so successful. So this is what I want to bring out of these podcast series and introduce you to some of the best people in the world who are coming up with ideas to help us navigate. Many of the ideas that I think about in my business career. And what's really an indicator of them is just how simple the root idea is, whether it be Goldratt's theory of constraints, think about compose, rules-based strategy. We think about, Cynefin work of David Snowden and how to understand what context we're in. That's really powerful in the adaptive world. I love a lot of the Derek Cabrera systems thinking. I find neuroscience really powerful. And of course, there's tools like Osterwalder's value proposition canvas. But just as a reminder, the real roots of the Osterwalder value proposition canvas find themselves in jobs to be done theory. Jobs to be done really was a bit of a breakthrough because the fundamental idea is people don't buy products, they hire products to get jobs done. And it's a beautifully simple idea, but has immense power. And that's why I'm so proud to have on today's podcast Scott Burleson. Right from the start, he's been a pioneer of this work, working with another pioneer at Alwick at Strategy N, and then moved to become the Chief Product Officer at the AIM Institute. And has written not one, but two books. And I think today we may reference the first, but give more to the second, which is the Jobs to be Done Pyramid, where he's tackled some of the core challenges that existed, nuances around product jobs and consumption jobs, but really gone head first into thinking about how to unpack and organize emotional jobs to be done. Scott's not just a theorist. He used to work at John Deere. He applied all of these techniques to what became the Series 1 tractor launch, which is maybe one of the most successful tractor launches of all time. So welcome, Scott. Really happy to have you on board. How are you doing?
Great. I'm doing great, Mark. It's great to be here. I don't know all of those frameworks you mentioned. One, I tell you though, the theory of constraints. I remember reading that as a manufacturing engineer. My boss handed it to me. The book, The Goal, I should mention, and I was like, just completely blown away. And it's funny. I think we think a lot of these new ideas and frameworks and stuff, but a lot of these ideas, if you know enough about them, you'll see they're actually a lot of times pretty old ideas with some newer labels. But the theory of constraints, that was huge because I would say it's before I had entered into an innovation type career. I was manufacturing engineering, but at the same time, a lot of the things I learned about how to make manufacturing work better, more efficient, a lot of those rolled right over. And some of your listeners may or may not know this, but you mentioned I worked for Tony Olwick, and a lot of, outcome-driven innovation was built on a lot of the quality movement and Six Sigma methods from the 1980s. So everything old is new again.
Well, as Goldratt would say, it's standing on the shoulder of giants. It's just getting an incremental gain. That's what you have to do just to be that little bit better.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're here today to talk about jobs to be done. So there may well be some listeners for whom this is a pretty new idea. So can we just take a step back before we delve into your recent work and bring everyone up to speed about why it was such a pioneering idea in product innovation?
Great question. I ran across jobs to be done when I was a product manager with John Deere going on or so over 2 decades ago now and getting further in the past, but the great thing about working for a company like John Deere, and I honestly did not even fully appreciate it at the time, is they had lots of resources. So if you're on a tractor project, you've got mechanical engineers, you've got electrical engineers, you've got material engineers, you even have computer engineers. This now it's not that novel, but 20 years ago, it seems interesting to me that these tractors had computers on them. But you've got all these resources and also for market research, et cetera. But, you know, as a product manager, it puts a lot of pressure on you because they're looking at you saying, "Hey, what conditions should this tractor be used in?" Or even something like more specific, "What tire options should this have? Or should it have cruise control, this or that?" And it's like, oh boy, some product managers, they just answer the questions. They just sort of use but I was like, man, we don't need to go with what I think. But also somebody's figured this out before now. I can't be the first person that's wrestled with this. And that led me to the writings of Clayton Christensen, a Harvard professor at the time, who unfortunately passed away about 5 years ago. But you know, he really brought jobs be done to the forefront and just began with this metaphor: a customer hires a product to accomplish a job. And with that phrasing, there's just so much there. It's like immediately we think our customers are our friends. We think we've got these great relationships. We think they love us, but it's really that we're really fooling ourselves. It is a transactional relationship. I mean, otherwise, think of all the technologies that have gone by the wayside. I'm sure Kodak thought it had good friends, and Blockbuster thought they had good Blockbuster Video. I'm not sure if that's a global, a known name.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
a
yeah, we
it
understand.
is,
Yes.
okay. In the US, there's a big chain of, VHS and DVD rentals. But anyway, but those customers, did they stay loyal as in, you know, product, forms change? No. It's a transaction relationship. And with a company like John Deere, you could really be fooled into thinking that they loved you because customers had shirts with your brand on it
Yeah,
and light switches and all sorts of things. But it's really with this simple phrase, the customer hires a product to accomplish a job. Really, reestablish that no, our product is to help a customer to accomplish something, a goal, an objective, or to solve some problem. And as we began to bring that into John Deere, I ran across a gentleman whose name you mentioned, Tony Olwick, who had written a book around this same time called What Customers Want. And actually, a friend of mine was getting an MBA, and he handed me the book and said, "Man, you have to read this." And boy, did I not know what I was getting into when I picked up that book and read it, because it really, my life has never been the same. But the book was called What Customers Want, and it was really a very thorough description of how to execute and apply jobs to be done process, where you begin with what a customer wants to accomplish and you break it down into the criteria, and it had a research process and really lots of details for how to execute. And so we brought Tony and Strategy into John Deere. And well, first of all, it clearly changed the way we did market research. But then beyond that, it changed the way we did product development. But beyond that, it changed the way we did marketing. It changed the way we spoke with our distributors. It really changed everything. And let me share this one last little anecdote to sort of close the loop on that. Some years after I had left John Deere, they asked me to come back in, and it was a sort of a very targeted type consulting project. But they asked me to go through all their past research and sort of bring together some conclusions. But when I did that, I looked at the research prior to bringing in jobs to be done, and then the research after bringing in jobs to be done. And research prior to jobs to be done, it was just all over the place. They were looking at attributes and desires and features, and there was nothing common to any of it. After bringing in jobs to be done, the method was so standardized. You could compare across product groups and eras, and you could compare about customers and segments, and it really added a lot of clarification. But anyway, I became so enthusiastic about it, I ended up actually joining Tony. I was privileged to do that at Strategy, and which is really where it was almost like getting a PhD or something. It was a great education for me to work with Tony and the incredible people at Strategy.
fabulous. So bring it real to our listeners. Can you tell me something? What was different about the value proposition for the Series 1 tractor that came out as a result?
Yeah, so the one series tractor, well, it's a great story. Actually, I think sometimes the stories of things that go badly are more interesting, but this one went well. But, but the direction given to our product team was this. There was a previous tractor called the 2305. It was made in Japan by a company called Yanmar. Yanmar made the entire tractor and they shipped it. We sold it. And this was the instructions given to our product team. And it was very successful. It was the number 2 in market share. It was very successful. Kubota's number 1. Anyway, so the instructions were said, hey, take that tractor and let's build it in the US. Don't do anything else. Don't add to it. Don't mess it up. It's simple. And also, as part of those instructions, we were told this is the bottom end of the market, the smallest tractors, and nobody will pay for anything. All they want is a cheaper price. That is all they want. These are your instructions. Bring the tractor here. Don't add any costs. Make it cheap. Those were our instructions. Well, we took advantage of a little a little loophole because there were 2 factories in the US who were fighting over who was going to build it. One was in Georgia, one was in Wisconsin. And so we had this massive matrix of executives having oversight into what we were doing because it was between these 2 factories. Well, that oversight meant that we had the opportunity to sort of make a bunch of decisions, just do a bunch of stuff because it wasn't entirely clear who was in charge because you had to go way up the ladder. We took advantage of that. We did not follow our instructions. We looked at this market and we studied it and we realized there were lots of jobs customers wanted to do, especially, well, when you look at jobs it's not just the jobs you perform with your tractor. There's another category of jobs that people perform as they actually use the product. And I will give one very specific example. They had to change their mower deck or remove the mower deck. The mower deck is underneath the tractor. Sometimes it's called a belly mower or a mid mower. And it was very cumbersome. It was very difficult to take that out. You had to pull these pins, you get grease on you, you might cut your hands. There are lots of jobs like this. I just mentioned this one for
Yep.
illustration. But so what we decided, well, we found all these unmet needs, all these outcomes that were unsatisfied. And this was a big one. It was people were having a lot of trouble performing this job of changing this mower. And there were a lot of others too. But so what we decided to do is we were going to come out with an economy model and a premium model. Now, the economy model would stay very close to our instructions given. It was going to be bare bones. In fact, it was going to be less. It was going to be even more economical than the model replaced. But the premium model, we added lots of features. We added this premium air ride seat. We had this cool function that to change that mower deck, you could drive on the deck, and there's all this mechanical stuff that had to happen, and it would connect itself and disconnect itself more or less
Wow.
automatically. Now, one of the reasons to even do research is if you're tackling a difficult problem, such as change the mid-mower deck, it's difficult for a reason. So we ran into major technical challenges to make that happen. So what we had to do was go back to management and we had to say, we need more time, we need more money. Here's our data using jobs to be done. Here's our data. If we solve this problem, it will be a huge deal, but it's going to be hard. And I can't give you a date of when we're going to solve it. It's like there's this ongoing joke, let's schedule a technical breakthrough. We'll have it next Friday. You can't do that. And so we really spent a lot of money. In fact, we had 2 parallel teams working on the problem at the same time. And ultimately we did solve it. But so when we came out with these tractors, I just gave that one example, this mid mower deck that attaches itself, but also with this premium seat, cruise control, we added lots of features to the high end. And we were absolutely, when we were showing this to leadership, just absolutely ridiculed for this, for ignoring our instructions. I mean, I guess you have to give them credit. They were trying to hose the fire, but we literally just did it anyway. And when the tractor came out, so the economy and the premium, but the premium was quite a bit more expensive. And guess what? The premium outsold the
Wow.
economy. Now, the premium had substantially higher margins, but so it was just a massive success, not only in volume, but in profitability. But really, we didn't do anything fancy or crazy. We started out our conversation talking about, hey, the most proven methods are really basic. They go way back. We looked at what jobs the customers wanted to accomplish. We looked at what was difficult. We looked at the competition, and also this was something they weren't doing very well. So we really didn't do anything fancy other than I mean, we definitely took a risk in not following instructions. But then, of course, what happens? When it's a big success, there's no shortage of people taking credit for it. I can tell you that.
Brilliant. Well done. So you became an expert with Ulwick on jobs to be done, but I think you stood on the shoulders of giant in the last book that you put together. And I think as I read it, you picked up a couple of frustrations and then you've taken them forward. You know, there's the issue of a product job versus the consumption job. But also tell me more about the emotional jobs piece, why you felt that needed unpacking and developing.
Hey, it is time for a quick break. We hope you are enjoying the podcast. If you have any comments or questions, the show notes for this episode have our contact details. We would love to hear from you. Perhaps you might have an idea for a future podcast. And now let's continue.
Yeah, one great benefit of teaching jobs to be done is you learn what people struggle with. You learn what's difficult, certain concepts. And there were really 4 areas that new product managers and innovators had difficulty with. One was honestly just the language of jobs to be done was some sort of could be a bit academic. And as one example that I believe you mentioned, there's this term called consumption job. Well, consumption job dates back to an article by Rita McGrath in the 1990s that predated jobs to be done. It just means something like when you use a product, you maintain a product, you purchase a product. These are, but this way, let's go back to my tractor. So people purchase the tractor to, let's say, to mow their or maintain their properties or mow their grass or whatever. Nobody buys a tractor because they want to maintain it, or they don't buy it for the joy of buying it, or they don't buy it because they want to store the tractor. There's this category of jobs around usage of a product, and that's what consumption jobs are. But the term was not well understood, so I renamed those to be product jobs, which to me is more intuitive. Another thing that was a challenge, though, is that jobs to be done, it's a verbal language-based way. We describe the markets using words, which, I mean, that makes sense. But the vast majority of people are more visually minded. So that was another part of the jobs we done pyramid. How can I make a visual structure that sort of contains these different types of jobs? And so at the base of the pyramid, we have product jobs, which are the jobs. So these are buy a tractor, maintain a tractor, store a tractor. It's all about using the tractor, all these things. Now, the next level up, core jobs, level 2, these are the jobs this is the reason you purchase a tractor. This is mow the grass or maintain your property. And by the way, so now we're independent of the solution because you could also hire a service to mow the
Mm.
grass, or you could buy some other product type, or you could hire a robotic mower. So now with level 2, you can see your competition a bit more accurately. And now I think this was the essence of your question. What about emotional jobs? Well, traditionally with jobs we've done, we had this category of emotional jobs, sort of a catch-all, how you want to be perceived or how you want to feel. But in practice, nobody really used them. Not much. But it occurred to me something that was really missing was this concept of identity. And so I've got my level 3 and 4. We'll just keep those in one bucket for simplicity.
Mm.
Levels 3 and 4 are about the identity. So when you bought that tractor, how does that help you to become the person you want to become? Clearly, that could differ for different people, but, I mean, if you're a person that wants to maintain, this beautiful yard, I mean, maybe part of the reason you purchased that tractor is because you're creative and you see yourself as an artist or something, or maybe it's just very minimal and, like, very Spartan, but you see yourself as a minimalist. So,
Mhm.
either way, you bought this thing, this tractor, and then there's things you have to do, you have to buy it, you have to maintain it, whether you bought it to accomplish certain things, mow the grass or whatever, but it helps you to become a minimalist or helps you to become an artist or a creator. And so that's your level 3 and 4. And that seems like a really big miss in jobs we've done. So these level 3 and 4s are about when you purchase this product. And I encourage anybody, the next time you go buy something, for anything, ask yourself the question, how does this thing I bought, this vacation I took, this hotel I booked, I don't know, this necklace, this
Mm.
jewelry, this smartphone, this computer. This Mac, why did you buy a Mac versus PC or whatever? Or why did you buy the expensive, the super expensive mug versus the cheap one? How is that consistent with who you see yourself as and how that helps you to become who you aspire to become? And I think you'll have an answer to that. And then finally, the top of the pyramid is emotional jobs, which is literally just the emotions that you have throughout the rest of the process.
Brilliant. Now, you've got no idea how excited I was when I heard that you were going to be putting this book into the greater world. Just listen to me, because most of my world is B2B.
Yes. Yes.
As it people interested in marketing and innovation, we get it that it's people buy products. And just
Yeah.
because it's B2B, it's
Yeah.
still emotional. It's part of the
Yes.
whole value proposition. But that
Yes.
message has been a battle. I remember giving a training session with a team on commercial excellence, and we were talking about value propositions. And the client was thumbing through my deck just before, and he saw a slide, which is a triangle, a little bit like your pyramid, and the word Maslow, and emotional needs. And he just said, "You can rip that out. That
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
nothing to do with today's session. This is B2B, Mark. I don't know what you're doing, but get it out." So I held my nerve, kept it in, and we delivered, and we found a way of making it work. But I'd love you, just if you can, maybe recount an example from the book, or an example or otherwise, of a B2B example, which helps bring home why the emotional jobs and the three types of emotional jobs are just not meaningful, but create value and create revenue and create profits. You got something to say?
100%. People are still people. So I'll see if I can describe an example and be sort of hide the characters if I can. So there was a person in a factory situation, and they were an engineer, an industrial type engineer, and they were in this particular factory. They had lots of older equipment. It worked fine, but part of what this person was choosing to do is he was looking across all this equipment and saying, well, if this piece fails, then our production's shut down. So, maybe we should have a bunch of inventory. But if you're
Mm,
an industrial engineer, you don't like that as a
mm,
solution, right? So what the person was targeted with is, hey, let me bring in some more machinery, maybe it's some sort of smaller in scope, but that can also, so when this goes down, we've got a backup plan. So they got all the product. So I don't think anybody disputes this. So I said, you got to purchase it, maintain it. So the thing is, the level 2 job is to, ensure redundancy or prevent a plant shutdown. But are we finished? When that person said, "Hey, I want to have these redundant systems," that completely says something about who they see themselves as. They're a person that keeps the plant running. They're a person that can be depended on. They're a person that when this other machinery goes down and they would have had to send employees home, they're a person that protected the rest of the enterprise from that. These are elements of their identity. So Mark, I hear this all the time about, B2B, not having this. And at this point, I work for the AIM Institute, and our specialty is B2B innovation. Our
yeah.
clients are B2B. So I feel like I have some, some standing with this market. But anyways, but it's very common to overlook that. But ask a question when a person's, it could be anything. If they're buying so let's go back to the tractor. Say you're a purchasing agent, you're buying a hose, you're buying a hydraulic hose for this tractor, and you're really beating up on your supplier and getting something cheap. Does that, you really want the cheapest hose, Well, that says something about your identity too. You're a person that protects the bottom line. You're the protector of the profits that is completely identity related. And when we can make these connections, we can be better marketers. One thing that's so funny about B2B, for all the claims of, emotional jobs don't work, I get that you don't believe that, because when I look at your websites, they're completely boring and it's a big list of products and specs and stuff. And it's just like complete. Talk to that purchasing agent. With our stuff, you protect the profitability. Talk to that industrial engineer. with this equipment, you keep the plant running. You protect the livelihoods of others. Speak to that. And I'm just coming up with these examples off the
Mhm.
top of my head. But with just a little bit, a small thought experiment. I mean, I think it's very clear that the decisions we make are in support of who we believe we are, and there's lots of room for that in product development, and marketing and sales too.
Thank you. With you on that one completely. So I'm just going back to the idea that we started with, that we're really here to help people who feel like the world's becoming a lot more complex and uncertain. And are moving in from the Cynefin world of the complicated
Yeah,
to the complex domain. But it surely is a bit of a relief when you hear, like Ulrich describe the phrases that jobs are stable over time. It seems like everything else is
yeah,
uncertain, but jobs are stable.
that's right.
Can you just expand on that to help people have a little bit more confidence?
Yeah, jobs are stable over time. Just take travel from A to B, and I sort of picked that. I picked that particular reason because most people have heard the Henry Ford quote. Or see if I can say it without butchering it. Nobody. Oh golly, nobody. If I'd asked customers what they wanted, they'd have said a faster horse. That's it. If I'd asked customers what they wanted, they'd have said a faster horse, seeming to imply that they couldn't have said they wanted this. Of course, they couldn't have said they wanted a car. They didn't know what a car was because that's a solution, that's a product. But could they have told you that they wanted to travel from one place to another? And could they have told you they want to get there safely? And could they have told you they want to be entertained? And could they have told you they want to take people with them and stuff with them and they want to be, comfortable temperature wise? They could have told you all of that. And that's in the like 1910s. But let's back up. How far back do we go when that's not true, when people wanted to travel from one place to another? I think you gotta break out your Bible, and, I think there were wanderers from the very first book.
Yeah.
So, I think for all of time, people have traveled from A to B. There will always be solutions for that, and all future, people will also travel from A to B. Now, that's not to say that new jobs are not created, but new jobs are created really it's their product jobs. So like there was no job to update the software before we had computers, for example. But certainly technically speaking, but that's a product job. So jobs that relate to products or product jobs, they can change as solutions go away. There's no job anymore around VHS tapes or whatever. But level two core jobs, the things we want to accomplish, travel from A to B, take a vacation, prepare a meal. Those have been around and will be around. So we don't say we say the terminology we always use is that they're stable. They're stable over time. So we stop a bit short of saying nothing changed. They don't change, but stable.
But I guess the thing that is changing is potentially more new solutions coming in, so you've got more competitive space. I want to move now from, understanding what people want to do a bit to start figuring out how do you understand where you sit versus the competition and what you'd need to do to get ahead of the competition to have a more successful innovation. How do you use jobs to be done to achieve that?
Yeah. So let's just go back to the tractor example. So that we had this product job I'll just pick an outcome. Let's say minimize the physical effort to change the mower deck. Let's say that. Now, just so that's the criteria you use to compare yourself to your competition. And at that point in time, basically everybody was the same in that it was this very hard, physical, dirty, difficult job or task to perform. And so that's one of the criterion you use to compare yours versus another. And so that's the beauty of it. So if you begin with the higher level job, maybe a beautify your property or whatever, you break it down into the criteria that you're using. You get into the product jobs, minimize the physical effort to change your mower deck, and you'd have another list of them. Then there you have your problem to be solved. And of course, you have to solve it in a somewhat of a meaningful way versus what else is out there. I don't know how you quantify that. I've heard people say it's got to be 15% better. I don't know. I don't really know how to do that, but it definitely has to be something substantial better than what a customer's other alternatives are. And by the way, something else jobs to be done gets you out of is, so let's just stick with the tractor example. looking beyond just tractors, but hey, what are the other options? Maybe you hire a service, maybe you hire something else to do it. And for beautifying your property, then that helps you to really see. Now you're seeing things the way your customers see it, because we would always be drawn to seeing the world through our own technologies and the stuff we build,
Mm.
but that's not how customers think about it for the most part.
I mean, it may be a bit old-fashioned to you, but I still have great value with clients just talking them on a 0 to 10 scale. 5
Yeah,
is, yeah, this just solves the problem. I can actually do what plow the field with this tractor.
yeah,
But if you could get it to X and I define what 10 would be, this would be, you blow my mind. You can then start, especially with a group of people, having a debate about
yeah.
the specifications just come out of the room if you just stop and open your ears once you give them that 2-point framing, from my experience.
I agree. And that's what things I should mention this. I work with the AIM Institute, and so Dan Adams has created his methodology called New Product Blueprinting. And I bring this up because of just what you said. It's more common in jobs you've done to have a 5-point scale, but Dan uses a 10-point scale for satisfaction. So how satisfied are you from 1 to 10? But what I love about it is that the number five is barely acceptable. That's the scale point, is barely acceptable. So if somebody is rating their ability to change their mower deck or reduce the effort to change the mower deck, if it's lower than 5, barely acceptable, they are definitely looking for some improvement. If it's higher than that, then it's somewhat acceptable, and they might not be as drawn to purchase another product.
And of course, the other great thing I've got out of this type of discussion is it stops you over engineering solutions
Yeah, for sure.
because he's so
Oh,
good.
that's a big one, Mark. Did you used to work in engineering for John Deere? Um, you know, this is an example I like to give with that. And by the way, I have to, if I guess I'll plug my first book. I go into that in my first book, The Statue in the Stone, on that, because I'll give a very concrete example. Since we're talking about John Deere, so the cab engineers at John Deere, every morning they would get up, and there was a group of them, these acoustic engineers. They've got one job: to make that cab tractor quieter, because by the nature of the machine, it tends to be very loud. And you can imagine it'd be nice to be quiet, and also be nice to play a podcast or music inside. And it's also be nice to not damage your hearing. And so these engineers, they get up every day. How do I make this cab quieter? And so there's all sorts of engineering that goes into surfaces, and fancy models and foams and just all kinds of crazy stuff I don't know anything about. But the question is, how do these engineers know when, if it's getting quieter and quieter, how do they know when it's, by the way, when you're improving that performance, usually, well, what happens with technology, there's usually a few pretty big gains you can get just by being smart using engineering.
Mm.
Then it gets actually, it's a little bit more difficult, and it gets progressively more difficult. And at some point, it's getting to where it costs like lots. It costs a little bit of money for those first gains. Now it costs a lot of money for
Absolutely.
that final little bits of making it quieter. And you could apply this to making something stronger. You can apply it to making something lighter. Anything I could, several other examples. But the point is, when have the engineers gone past the point of where customers are not looking at for it to be quieter? They're not looking for it to be lighter. They're not looking for it to be any more stronger. And yet, if the engineers continue, they're making it more expensive, and they're literally damaging value. I mean, it's funny. There's lots of markets that are trying to make their products quieter. I mean, sorry, not quieter, but lighter, especially like automotive, where you're wanting to, lighter means better fuel efficiency. And so you go from steel to aluminum. That gets it. So that's sort of you've done the easy work when you go from
Mhm.
steel to aluminum, because you can still have aluminum pretty strong, and it's substantially lighter. But now, if you go from aluminum to titanium, now you've got something that's worth, its cost like 50, 70% more. And so, you got to know where those thresholds are. And I don't think that question's handled very much. I'll just plug my first book, Statue in the Stone. I do go through some models
Yeah.
of how you know where those points are.
Yeah, I mean, I think the risk of over-engineering, I came from DuPont. That was a company that had that
Yeah.
risk of doing, and the other thing I like about Dan Adams, and I'm sure you're involved, is it's not just how satisfied you are with a job, but how important it is, because that stops you innovating things that you might have a potential to have a big gap on your competition, but frankly, customers don't care.
Not important, and who cares? Yeah.
There are better things to worry about. So I mean, that's for me, as you can see, I'm hinting at the importance of really getting into customer psychology and what it means to them. Sort of teeing up maybe my next question for you as we're heading towards the end. And I have to ask this question. And for the record, we are now October 2025, and pretty much everything you read in the press at the moment is AI. Yeah. So yeah, so if you're listening, and let's see how you're good at predicting and how we think the significances are for people in the future listening to this podcast. As you look at the work that you do in jobs to be done, helping innovators, where is it that AI can be impactful, and where is it maybe overhyped?
Yeah, so I'll give the current state, and then I'll play a fool's game, and I'll speculate about the future a bit. So prior to AI, so I'll speak about my own experiences as a practitioner. So in other words, I'm interviewing customers, I'm gathering customer needs, we're doing surveys, etc. So prior to AI, it was always a big step to do a lot of secondary research. So there's lots of things I would do, but I would read customer forums. But I would just like, let's just let me take an example. If you're studying a med tech field, a great thing about med tech, if you're studying a surgery, for example, is there's lots published on that surgery. You've got lots of academics and physicians. There's lots of information. Before I pay, $500 an hour or whatever for a surgeon's time and my time, frankly, I'm going to spend a lot of time doing all this background work, reading all these medical journals. I'll go ahead and I actually reveal one of my secrets here. I usually say it's one of my secrets, but for med tech, or should I say this? I'll go ahead and say it. There's YouTube videos of surgeons teaching procedures to other surgeons, telling them what to watch out for. It's a wealth of information. So that's just one. But for each market, maybe you find maybe for one forum, I mean, for one market, there's a forum that's used. But anyway, point is you do lots of secondary research. And so as I first started using AI, that was the first thing is I can do that a whole lot faster with AI. I can just, instead of reading, going through 2 dozen highly technical journals, I can just get a lot of those results with AI. So it replaces secondary research for me. But then as you get used to it, it's like, hey, I could just sort of program in the job and just ask it for a complete set of needs, a complete set of outcomes. And you can do that. You can do that. And so here's the current state. Even um, jobs who don't know outcome-driven innovation research follows the common market research practice. Also, is well published in design thinking as well, where you have these 2 phases. Also, just brainstorming or
Mm.
problem solving. Where the first phase is, hey, what are all the possible customer needs? What's the complete list? And again, I mentioned from brainstorming because if you're problem solving, one of the first things you define the problem and then you come up with all the possible solutions. So AI is great. There's zero risk at coming up with all the possible customer needs in a market before you go talk to anybody or even after you talk to
Mm.
anybody. Get that complete list. Now, as you're interviewing customers, you'll see some phrases that you might not quite understand. So you can further use AI to sort of, hey, let me get some understanding and greater context about this. And the reason, and of course, it will give you hallucinations periodically, but you're not making any assumptions about what's important. You're not making any assumptions, so it's still safe. And so at this point in time, in late 2025, that's really where it basically sort of ends in that now you still need to do surveys and get real customers to prioritize things because when you also go to prioritize, you got to be real clear about who you're targeting. When you throw the net a bit wider during the divergent phase of gathering all the needs, now you got to be really focused. And so at this point, you still need to use real customers to prioritize. Now, I will say once you've got your data back, you can use AI to help analyze the data in ways you could not do before. So I think that's where we are today. The speculation, though, is where would that go to? Would it be possible you could populate a database and then have these synthetic users to prioritize them for you. And I'm going to say at some point that probably will be possible. It's just, but it's not. But today, I feel like that would be too high of a risk. But eventually, I feel like, I mean, if you educate the system well enough, it should be able to give you the answer. So I think that's where it'll ultimately go.
But it's got to be something that's based on real human behavioral science
That's what I
because
mean. You're
it's
gonna
got to
have to
be.
give it the inputs first. You're gonna have to train it first, right? And even again, I'm not saying that's now. I'm just saying, I mean, one of the things, and actually this was a chapter in my first book. I forget the name of the chapter, but it was essentially about the fool's errand of predicting what's gonna happen with the technology. It's just like people are notoriously bad at it. I mean, no matter actually, it almost seems like the more expertise you have in a technology, it's almost like the worse you are. And I think that's because you're so embedded in the stuff you know, and honestly, you attach maybe some identity to your expertise. Let's just take a very concrete example I just brought up. Let's just imagine you're a data analyst and like you're a statistical whiz, and you've spent 20 years of your life being the best at statistics ever. And now potentially, a college kid could ask a few prompts, could take your data set and replace your 20 years of knowledge of. I mean, maybe that's an extreme example, but you can see where if you have entrenched expertise, you might be a little blinded to the possibility of how much it could change things.
Totally. I mean, any good book on innovation within the first or second chapter talks about something like being curious, having a childlike mindset, a beginner's mindset, because without that, you can't be open to change.
Couple that with one last little thing. When digital photography, the first people to use digital photography were, at any scale, were insurance adjusters because they could take quick pictures. The resolution didn't matter. None of that mattered. But high-end photographers did not go away as digital photography got better, right? And so my suspicion is that 20-year pro in statistics, he'll just need to get good at using AI, and the 20-year expert using AI will outperform the novice at AI. So I
Yeah.
think the expertise, I think the value of that will still be there, but they have to adopt AI as part of their tool set.
Well, Scott, it should become as no surprise to say I've got a lot of questions up my sleeve, but I haven't got the time. So I'm going to ask you if you would think about coming back again, because there's
Of
many
course,
more
yeah.
things, just as a little teaser maybe for next time. I loved the emphasis you were giving on your book to try and get jobs to be done and expand its usefulness. And that comes up several places because it's traditionally had the domain of product innovation, but you have a pretty good stab at teasing us into thinking of other applications for jobs to be done. So if we could discuss that another time, amongst many other things, I'd love to do that. So thank you for doing that. But there is one last question. I really hope the listeners have enjoyed this, and I do hope they're desperate for more. Where can they find you? Where can they get more? And where can they build their expertise?
Yeah, so if you go to jobstobedonepyramid.com, you'll find my latest on that. My blog is at learnpm.pro. That's learnpm as in product management, learnpm.pro. And I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. I think that's how we connected, Mark. And that's
Yeah.
you can actually go to W Scott Burleson, Burleson, and that directs to my LinkedIn page.
Fabulous, Scott. Really thank you for your time. Well done. Really great show. Thank you much. Hope you appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Arcaro Insights podcast. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed producing it for you. If you have not done so already, please do subscribe with your favorite podcast provider. Even better, it would be hugely appreciated if you could share the podcast with friends and colleagues. Thank you.